Welcome back to the Jake Underwood Show right here on AM 1420, The Answer. And we all know what happened in Minnesota and in the wake of that fatal shooting. Immigrant enforcement, there's protests, and they've spread throughout the city, and now public school districts in the area are closing campuses or shifting students to remote learning, citing safety concerns. But critics are warning that it looks like less of a security decision and more of a political one. And I want to welcome our next guest now, Rhyen Staley. He is the Director of Research at Defending Education. His organization has been tracking how ideology and crisis politics are shaping education policy across the country. Sir, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Jake. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
And so I guess, because I don't know that people are necessarily familiar with what's going on there. So if you could just real quick, we obviously know about the shooting, we know about the protests, but what exactly are the schools doing in reaction to that?
Yeah, last week or shortly after that tragic incident, the schools came out, and I'm going to say we have some evidence that there's probably at least some urging from the teachers' unions to shut down campuses. They citing, as you said already, they cite safety concerns and so forth. But what it really is, from our vantage point, and I've been writing about this in op-eds for years now, is this ideology that's permeating the entire education ecosystem of activism and politicizing the education. So the humor, I was chuckling as we were coming in because you were playing Pink Floyd. And that song, maybe back in the days that they wrote it, were like anti-conservative, right? Like possibly. But that's very much what is happening in these schools. And so this dominant ideology that everything has to be pushing the Overton window politically left, and this situation where they're shutting down schools, especially from my personal opinion on this work, is an attempt to free up teachers and students to get in the streets and protest. And if I may, this is a little bit of breaking news. We are working on some information, and I have an op-ed forthcoming on this, where we highlight that there are outside nonprofits training these students in the Twin Cities to be agitators and protesters on the streets. And these groups are affiliated with the teachers' unions. And this is not new, Jake. This has already been happening on the West Coast in the Bay Area. So I can reference that for your listening audience to go back and look at the anti-Israel protests that were happening there over the years. And they're often led by one group in particular, the Arab Resource Organizing Center, which themselves have a contract with the San Francisco Unified School District, and they are a fiscal project of the Tide Center. And so when you start to connect the dots and you look at the research and so forth, you can backtrack that these nonprofit groups that have been protesting, some of them since 2017 when Trump first took office, it's the same groups funded by the same people, and they have their claws in the teachers' unions. They have inside of these schools. And then you add in, Jake, the colleges of education that are explicitly training teachers, first and foremost, to be social justice activists and to go into the schools and get these kids to be social justice activists themselves. I hope that's not too much.
No, it's not, but I do want to recap it. I just want to make sure. So you're saying that you have an op-ed that's coming out that is proving that there are outside nonprofits basically influencing the schools to basically create little social justice warriors and to follow their lead.
Yes, we have both a report and we have an op-ed coming out that will provide that evidence, and that these nonprofit groups are either affiliated with the teachers' unions, but they also have, this is another angle that these schools, these people use, they create student clubs that go into the schools. And legally, the schools have to allow these clubs, like the battle over TPUSA, Turning Point USA, having clubs in schools. And these people have been at it for decades. And so they have these clubs within the schools themselves that are then recruiting the students and so forth.
Do you think that's why there was so much? Because, I mean, locally here, there was a lot of pushback against at some school districts about TPUSA getting into these high schools and forming these clubs. Could that be the reason why? Because it's kind of messing up their system. They're able to churn out hundreds of kids a year from each school district.
Yeah, it's a danger, because if you put yourself, and I know a lot of people, because I'm so deep in this, so forgive me, but the real radicals, I'm not talking, by the way, Jay, can we back up for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is not every teacher. This is not every teacher. I want to be very clear. I'm a former teacher, by the way. My wife is a teacher. My parents were teachers. My grandmother. I'm a third-generation educator. Most teachers, especially in these non-deep blue areas, they want to go in, teach the kids, love on the kids, take care of them, go home to their families, take care of their families, right? Grade papers, do those things. They are not hardcore activists. But there are areas like in the Twin Cities where they have rigged the hiring system even to screen out, and we have reports on this on our website, defendinged.org, that show that they're screening for these activists inside the schools, just like the Ivy Leagues have been screening for activists in their process of admitting students. And so going back to Turning Point USA, the mindset from these radicals is that TPUSA is, quote, fascist, and therefore they have no right to a voice inside of schools, because if they allow Turning Point USA or any other right-wing group to have a club like they have clubs, it's only going to radicalize the children, ironically radicalize the children into conservative right-wing fascists, and they can't have that. And so that's why they push back so hard. They're not about free speech. Let's put that up on in the front of the screen right away.
Oh yeah.
They're only about speech that pushes the window left. And there's one of the founding grandfathers of all this ideology is Herbert Marcuse. Not to get again too academic, and he basically posited this idea of liberating tolerance, which was you cannot let conservatives speak because they're fascist and they will promote Nazism. And he came out of Nazi Germany right at the beginning of Hitler taking over. So that framed, of course, a lot of his ideology. But that's what's going on here. It's a deeply ingrained ideology into the College of Education, into teachers' trainings, into the DEI nexus, and then that's what's happening with our schools. And then, so to kind of like bring it all zoomed back out to your original question, that's what's happening in Minneapolis. And I want to be very clear that right now the anti-ICE protests is a convenient tool for them to advance their agenda, right? Before it was anti-Israel, pro-Palestine. Before that, it was, the Women's March, right? That kind of was one of the first starting things. It was Black Lives Matter. It doesn't matter. They will find a new thing to grab onto as long as it moves their agenda.
I want to echo the point that you made, because I was lucky. I had very good teachers growing up, and I was not a great student, but I had very good teachers who kept me focused and really helped me. And I don't know that I would be here without those teachers. So I do want to make sure people know it's not all teachers, but I think it's safe to say that, because I go to school, some friends of mine, their kids, I go to their basketball games and different things. You can spot the teacher that you might need to look at and be like, I don't know that you're in it for the teaching as much as you are making warriors. Let me ask you this, because there was a recent Fox News report that quoted that education experts are warning that these closures may be about political points, not actual danger. Obviously, you agree with that. What is the next step? Like, what is the end goal? What are they trying to do?
Well, they're training the next generation of activists. Number one, this is despite what the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randi Weingarten, says, because she's kind of a cover for them, and she says, well, this is not political. This is social justice. It's very much political, and they are driving an anti-American, anti-Western ideology. I mean, look, the issue is never the issue. So again, it's not about ICE. It's not about Israel, et cetera, et cetera. The issue is about a revolutionary change. and that's what DEI is about. That's what anti-whiteness is about. All this crazy academic jargon, so forth. In the end, they are pushing curriculums. Like, for example, the Twin Cities schools have a curriculum called ethnic studies. It's state mandated now. It's covered by, we're teaching history and culture. That's not what they're doing.
Right.
They're using that as a packaging to push a very radical, far left ideology upon students. And Jake, the culminating unit for that entire curriculum is quite literally street activism. That's the goal of it. And so they're turning the classrooms into to reference kind of a niche theory, the paperclip machine, where you teach AI to create paperclips, and all it does is just creates paperclips. And the system has become an activist training system. Now, here's I guess I want to lay out a positive caveat, having been a teacher in a classroom. These walkouts and these protests that these students are engaging in, just like in the real world, it's a very, very small subgroup of students. Any student that joins them, let's be honest, they want to get out of class.
See, that's what I thought. And I talked about that with my producer the other day. We were talking about the walkouts. And I'm like, I'll be honest, when I was in high school, I would have walked out just to get out of class. I don't support anything that's going on. But, it's kind of like when there's a fire drill, you're like, oh, okay, cool, I get to go outside. But then I get to leave because of activism? Okay. And this is something else, too, because this is something that I don't even think they're hoping that they train them that they never think this way. But it's natural for people to rebel against authority. And if the authority is telling you to go out and this is what you need to fight for, they need you to do this and you have to do this, you're going to have people rebel naturally. And I'm hoping that we'll start to see that. But it's there. So what's the span with age-wise and grade-wise? Because I guess when I'm hearing a walkout, I'm assuming it's just like high school.
No, well, I can validate that. They're definitely pushing this into middle school. And Minnesota, and we've already seen this, not from a governmental mandate type of way in California, but we've seen it in California as well. But in Minnesota, for sure, it is a mandate that they integrate this ethnic studies curriculum from preschool, kindergarten, all the way up through university, especially K-12, okay? And then they want to embed it into every curriculum. So your English class, your math class, that they're drilling these kids into this oppressor-oppressed matrix, right? So when you look at the training documents that we are going to expose very soon here, show that they view ICE as quite literally they're training students to treat ICE like a mass shooter coming into their building. Wow. Now, we have no evidence that ICE has, maybe a single case here or there, we have no evidence that ICE has actually come onto school grounds and into buildings, like just come in, storm in, and go after people. We have no evidence of that. Yeah. It's a real concern, and I get that. Like, they shouldn't be doing that, in my personal opinion, like my very personal opinion. But schools have policies for that, by the way. But that's not happening, but that's what they're teaching the kids. And they're teaching them that they should go into this, shooter lockdown type of mentality. And you're teaching this to middle school kids, and you're teaching this curriculum to middle school kids that there's these big bad guys, and the big bad guys are police officers. I'm not kidding you. It's in the curriculum. Police officers, like your everyday police officers, and ICE agents, and even conservatives. And Jake, I don't know if you've seen the reports, but we're seeing that the street radicals, I'm sidestepping a second. Yeah. We're seeing street radicals chasing down anybody they believe to be even associated with ICE agents in Minnesota. What's going to happen when you start putting kids on the street who don't have a developed prefrontal cortex and are very prone to risk taking and are wound up on emotional false narratives? Yeah, I'm really, really concerned about this. This is very dangerous territory that we're all playing in, and so it's such a real tragedy what's going on with our students in our schools, and I guess to give you kind of like where I stand in this is our school. These schools have a reading proficiency rate of 30 to 35%.
Wow.
So we have uneducated kids being wound up emotionally and shoved onto the street. It is a ticking time bomb if we don't get it calmed down.
Well, and something else to just add another layer to that is not to mention, what medications are they on? SSRIs could be playing a part in this, and just with the way that they load prescription drugs into teenagers, and they don't necessarily know how they work or how they're going to react to them, and they can't control. Some people, when they take Adderall or something like that, it makes them angry. They can't develop those emotions, and they're just wow. So they're sending a bunch of emotionally charged teenagers into the streets and telling them that they're basically fighting for everyone's rights. That's a scary thought.
Correct. And then you have the reinforcement that certain constitutional rights being allegedly constitutional rights being violated, like what we saw with the church over the weekend.
Yeah.
These kids don't know constitutional law. They only know what they're being trained on. And I can tell you they're not being trained that's unacceptable. And when leadership comes out and says, no, that's totally cool because that's a constitutional right to stop somebody else's constitutional right of freedom of worship, what do you think children are going to do? Because they're children. And I don't see leadership on the far left pulling these people back, saying, no, that's too far. That's too far. And so again, we have a real crisis on our hands that hasn't hit the crisis level yet. And so I'm hoping that we can be preventative and say, hey, listen, we got to come together and get this solved. Put these kids back in the classroom. Let's get them educated, because that's what the schools are supposed to be doing, is not political education, but a real education on how to read, how to think, how to do math, and how to be good citizens.
What are the parents saying about this, if they even know what's going on?
See, that's the other thing. My wife and I have spent a long time working with urban, low socioeconomic students. So a lot of the type of students that would be in these schools, and obviously they're not all the same, right? But a general gist. That's another concern, is how many of these kids have single-parent households? How many of these poor kids they're being raised by amazing grandparents, right? Who they're grandparents. And I've worked with they're awesome people, but they're also grandparents.
Yeah.
And there's nothing against that. But there's a difference between two loving young parents in there, et cetera, right? And so do these kids come from broken homes? Are the parents even engaged? And so when you have homes that are broken, and by the way, we don't know this. I'm kind of just throwing this information out to paint a picture.
Yeah.
But when you have broken homes, regardless of race, regardless of economic income, those kids are going to seek out people that they believe are their friends and that they can trust. And so all of a sudden you have these activists swoop in and put their arms around them and say, trust us. And it could be teacher activists, it could be nonprofit it doesn't matter. And so the kids looking for attention and looking for adults that care about them are going to gravitate towards that.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Wait, real quick, what's your what? Because this is definitely something I know people are going to want to read when this is released. What was the website one more time?
Defendinged.org. That's defendinged.org.
Yeah, because this is the issue, whether it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. Politics, because that's what this is. It's all politics. It's all copycat. So if they see that it's successful in one area, it's going to spread throughout the country. So yeah, wow, this is absolutely insane.
And we've seen we've seen this activation in North Carolina already before Christmas. And if you read carefully articles, you'll see, and teachers were involved. We saw this last spring with anti-ICE protests in Oakland, where there were Antifa members who are teachers activating students to get out in the streets. So, by the way, this is not just unions. This is not just nonprofits. This is Antifa or Antifa-affiliated groups also engaged in this.
Wow, that's. I'm speechless. I really am. I just it's so much.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's so much to just wrap your head around, and you want to think. And once again, it's not all teachers. I want to make sure we make that clear, because there are some very good teachers out there. But, you send your kid to school and you think that they're going to be okay. They're going there to learn, and they're supposed to be learning math and how to read better and how to spell, and instead they're coming home with a manifesto and just indoctrination.
And I want to encourage teachers who might be listening, who feel like they're trapped in these schools and they keep their head down because they don't agree with the crazies. And by the way, it might be like two crazies in the building who are very outspoken and very aggressive, and the rest are just like keep their heads down.
Yeah.
Feel free to contact us, please, and we'll help. We'll, if anything, it'd be a shoulder to cry on. But please reach out to us as well, because we're here for you. Like we want to truly get schools back. That's the one thing I miss, Jake, about teaching and coaching. I spent 25 years coaching, and this stuff's in the coaching world too. Make no mistake.
Yeah.
Is I really miss working with the students, and I had some amazing peers I worked with, and when I first started, I had some amazing administrators who really did genuinely care about the students and them being educated. And then over the decades, this has really spiraled in some places out of control.
Rhyen, I want to thank you for your time today. We're getting the wrap it up music, so I got to go to break. But once again, give us that website one more time so we could stay on track and make sure we get the latest on everything going on here.
Absolutely. defendinged.org. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate it.
Yep, thank you for your time. That, of course, is Rhyen Staley. He is the Director of Research for Defending Education. That was a lot. Wow. Woof. Be careful, but just make sure you're paying attention. The stuff your kids bring home, make sure you're paying attention to it. Get involved in the school board meetings.